Welcome to the Rebuild Procurement Podcast, the number one procurement podcast in the world, where we dive deep into topics to keep procurement people up to date and ahead of their peers. Subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pod Pocket, wherever you're listening to, and then go to the others while you're at it. Today, Alan, we're going to be going through some tariff hot takes, and we'll sprinkle that with some opinions. I'm Tom Finn, bringing 15 years on the client side, procurement, finance, and category management experience in large and small cap orgs.
And I'm Alan Veek, a procurement geek on the sell side of our street, and I've assembled a team of superhuman procurement professionals doing managed services at a little company that we call Summit.
All right, Alan. So hopping into this, you have some takes. So why don't you just lead us off here, and then we'll chat through.
All right. And maybe the setup here is some of the interesting tariff news that's come out in the last few weeks that we've not necessarily spent a ton of time talking about. But maybe just a little recap on kind of some of the big picture things that have happened. In April, the current administration in the United States announced reciprocal tariff executive order, which the whole idea was we were going to drive some fairness in the tariff policies by making our tariffs reciprocal to what our trade partners have long been charging us. And there was an executive order that Trump signed that basically said we're going to be changing our tariff policies. It freaked everybody out. There were some big numbers thrown out there. There was kind of a pullback in imports as people were trying to figure out what to do. The whole world was a box that was shaken up. And I think that's largely how Trump and his administration like to negotiate, if you want to call that negotiation. They like to shake the box. They like to basically disorient everybody first, and then when everybody's disoriented, soften some things, change some things. So in the last month or two, there have been some specific negotiations with specific countries to adjust the reciprocal tariff rates downward in a positive direction for those countries. So China roughly settled somewhere around 34%, the European Union around 20%, Japan around 24%, India about 26%. A lot of these things are, the paint is still drying on some of these agreements. They're largely verbal agreements at this point, or memorandums of understandings, letters of intent. Nothing officially signed yet, but those are some of the numbers that are starting to shake out. And then Trump has kind of got a list of other countries that he's meeting with. There's still a bunch of other countries not listed there that I think are interested in getting in the deals. South Korea, Malaysia, some other places. Likely, I think Vietnam was announced just a couple of days ago. So there are some. There's this sense of the windows closing and everybody wants to get in and make an agreement before it's too late.
Yeah, and I think actually China, did they extend theirs by like 90 days? There's some,
I think
I'm not
right.
sure what got extended at this point, but something got extended 90 days additional, I think as of 8/11.
Yeah, that sounds exactly right. Buying a little bit more time to make some decisions there and to figure some things out. But in the meantime, there's been this what's quite interesting is what I'd call an expansion of the negotiation space. So Tom, I think that you are a pretty solid negotiator when I think of the world of procurement and kind of negotiation.
I thank you, Alan.
I tend to be, so I've always been on the sales side, so my negotiations coming from the other direction. I've not necessarily negotiated with suppliers like you've negotiated with suppliers, but in the time that I did spend on your side of the ledger in procurement, it was largely about RFP driven competition or online competition. So there was very rarely face-to-face negotiations or some sort of a kind of where you had to be very thoughtful about all the things that are involved in negotiations, like BATNAs and gives and gets and all of those sorts of things. So I am less articulate in that sort of space where I think you're much more articulate than I am. As you're looking at the way Trump and the Trump administration are negotiating these deals, what are your thoughts? I mean, to me, I look at it and it's a bit of a wonder. It's like, wow, this guy is the art of the deal. This guy does know how to negotiate. He's been doing this since he was 3 years old, it feels like.
Yeah. I mean, it's always like, it kind of first things first is how much power do I wield when I walk into the room, right? If I'm going to be on the receiving end, then all right, I have to position myself with power. But it's a little bit different than walking in saying like, I own this place, right? I am CEO of this place, and I want what I want, which has kind of been his approach. I mean, his style, it doesn't necessarily always translate into, if you're working at a company, you could just do this, right? One, you don't always have the authority just to make all these calls, which he does. And I think a lot of his folks, everything kind of rolls back up through him. He's kind of like the decision maker. But for the positioning wise, I mean, he positions it, and then if he doesn't get the initial first reaction he wants, he then repositions it and makes it worse. I mean, it's like from a just watching standpoint, it is quite impressive because where he to the from that standpoint, it's like he has a place he's going to give to, right? Saw this with like at least the way he talked about this NVIDIA deal he had with Jensen. He's like, yeah, he put up a good fight, right? I told him 20, and he said, Mr. Trump, President Trump, let's make a deal. Let's go down. We ended up at 15, but it was hard fought, right? So it's kind of like that's the same idea, even with China and these other countries. He's going to set it higher. He expects a counter, and then with that counter, he's going to come down a little bit. It's just a matter of will it come down as much as you want. That's kind of where then you have to have your hand in the relationship and know where you stand too.
Yeah. And I think it's a little bit easier for him to do that because these are country to country negotiations. They're not person to person, so to speak, right? Because while they are person to person, you think about somebody like Jensen and Trump negotiating. Those people will change. Jensen won't always be CEO. Trump will not always be president. So it's a short-term relationship. Whereas I'll run the risk of giving my clients too many good ideas about how to negotiate with me, but it would be the equivalent of a client that I had a 3 or a 4 year relationship with, and kind of an understanding that every year we're going to be renewing our statement of work and extending our relationship for another year. And then the discussions just around kind of the finer points. It would be as though that client showed up and just said, I'm canceling the contract, no further work for Summit. Boom, my head goes like this, right? Mm-hmm. Boom, like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And then you're all of a sudden in a different spot. As you mentioned, you kind of come in and you try to understand the power dynamics. The power dynamics have now completely changed once that's the discussion that was had. I think back to one of my clients who bought a particular piece of AI, and he was forecasting to me that, hey, listen, I don't think it's going to be a big deal for you this year, but next year, this AI, I think it's going to replace all your people. And while I didn't really believe that, and while the threat of it was 12 months away, it kept me up, right? I was thinking
that mother effer. Lost a good weekend's worth of sleep.
Oh my God. No. Months worth of sleep because I was thinking about it. Because, of course I was saying, I don't think that's real because I don't think these AI tools are that good. But then you say, okay, am I the stupid guy now? Am I assuming things, and I need to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more paranoid? So, it works. It works its magic when you shake the box like that. And so there's probably something to be said for all negotiators. You should think that way.
But I think that positioning of him is the right one as well, right? If I'm coming at it, I think is the person's approach who you were working with there. He's like, Alan, kind of heads up. We're going to be going through this. Like, we've worked together for a little while. You're going to have to come in probably quite competitive because you're going to be competing with this other thing. And I'm also going to get a lot of pressure internally to do something with this other thing we've invested in. So might not work out, but I kind of, from a business standpoint, I hope it does. Right. So, and then that allows you then kind of like this trickle down to say, how can we as an organization be more competitive and do things differently and shake the box for them so they don't have to shake the box on their own.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it did take me down a series of thought experiments that I think I'm at a better spot now because it forced me to think. It forced me to think about how to be a better supplier to this customer. So. Yeah,
which is awesome. But I think that's the right, from a relationship, like from a negotiation standpoint, I think you guys will probably both end up in a better spot. I think always being open, there's a point at which you can't be overly honest, but there's like that kind of situation where it's, hey man, Sharon, this thing looks pretty good. Let's talk through it a little bit. But I think that's cool. That's a good example.
That's good. So let me maybe with that backdrop and with that discussion, maybe I'll give my first hot take on one of the impacts that come out of this tariff situation. And the first is that the recent wave of contracts artificial intelligence tools. So these would be the tools that you can upload your corpus of contracts into, all your contractual documents into, and then query against them to say, where do I have anything inside a contract that mentions tariffs? Where do I have anything that mentions most favored nation status? Where do I have anything that talks about pricing? I think that these contract AI tools that do that for you quickly and efficiently are going to be hot. I think that there's going to be a burning need for these things, and I think they're up to the task. I've certainly spent a lot of time with my team and with some of my clients looking through these tools, and the what they can do with what's inside a contract and what's inside a corpus of contracts is nothing short of amazing. So I think that this is going to be hugely important because, especially if you think about large companies that have a lot of relationships with companies that import things into the U.S., the ability to be able to understand what's in there and react to it is going to be the need to do that's going to be super fast. So I think this kind of industry of contract AI tools is going to be hot. Any thoughts on that?
No, I totally agree. I mean, it does a great job of that sifting through documents. I remember I was part of it was a spinoff of a public company, and we had to go through all of the contracts. It was like me and the legal team. It wasn't huge, but we were going like every category manager. Okay, you have to go through and understand if there's assignment in your contracts or not. And it was like weeks long process of going through this. I mean,
Oh my gosh.
feels like Stone Age at this point talking about this because you almost could just, hey, which contracts don't have assignment?
Yep.
And then maybe you have to still go through a little bit more, but it is not weeks. It's like within a week, you're going to be quite satisfied with the outcome and probably feel very satisfied that you've gone through in depth. So I think there's a lot of, I mean, that was horrible. It was probably months. I mean, going through these things, like reaching out to folks and doing these, like, can we get assignment? It was something that in the future should be able to be done quickly. And I just this to your point though, Alan, the ability to go through contracts and understand what you need and the implications of things is B plus, A minus right now, if not A.
I think that's right. And I think there's a corollary to this, which in the world of procurement, we always know that spend data is never as good as we want it to be. I think that the notion of having some spend analytics tools that are driven by AI is a very same thing. So where you basically have it ingest all of your AP, your accounts payable invoices and records, and then generate out a story about, in this category, you have this many suppliers and you spend this much with each supplier. Again, that's something that to try and get good, accurate data and to try and do a clean analysis took months, and it was never right. But I'm hoping that the generation of AI tools will kind of allow for that. And a part of, I'll tell you what I think the dirty little secret there is. A part of that is the distance from the data will help a procurement team. When you're in the data and you see how messy it is, you're like, is this even worth doing? Because these data are not accurate. But when you have an AI do it and you're a distance, you're an arm's length away from it, and you get an answer that says, in this category, you have a clean number of 9 suppliers. Here are their names, and here's how much you spend with each one. You tend to believe that data, even if it might be a slight hallucination. You're just hoping it's going to be directionally correct.
Yeah. Yeah, because it doesn't need to be perfectly correct. And if you're ever going to step in and have a conversation with a supplier, you can always make sure. I do think that the AI side of things is going to lead a little more to accepting of hallucinations on things like that over the next year. Like hand wavy is going to be fine with that kind of stuff.
Yes.
It does feel like it's kind of, because for the most part, I know I've had to go through and do the review of a very large organization, like by myself, all the spend, right? Where are the credit card data? As earlier in my career, like get all the credit card data, get this, get that. Like, okay, pull it from SAP or Ariba or whatever it was in. Go walk over to the AP team, right? Have all those conversations to kind of true things up. Yeah, and I think people would just say, well, this is just so much darn faster that, we can eyeball it and say that's way off. But if it's like within reason, let's start having some conversations. And from there, we'll make sure as we go down and we choose the ones that are most important, then we'll certify this stuff. But this is like enough for upfront conversation of where should we focus our time.
Yep. Okay. So I like that. So hot take number one, contracts AI, corollary spend analytics AI is going to be hot, and it's going to be an industry that the solutions in there will continue to grow. There will be increasing uptake by procurement teams of these sorts of solutions. Hot take number two, let's call this the bad news, or the tough message, or the tough love. Hot take number two is I believe that procurement is not up to the challenge of these tariffs. I believe that procurement has been caught flat-footed, and our houses are not in order. And when the CEO comes down, the CFO comes down and starts pounding and saying, where are we on these tariffs? I think it's like lifting the rock. I think procurement is scrambling. And what should have been kind of staged and positioned over the course of the last 10 or 20 years is not in place. I think that most procurement teams have not focused on excellence. They've not focused on, well, what are the possible things that could happen? They don't have plan Bs in place. And I think they're scrambling right now and looking for some help. And I think that there's going to be a pretty big, it's like if you think about what COVID did to our economy, it basically took, 10 years of change and compressed it into 1 year. I think the same thing's going to be happening with these tariffs for procurement teams. We're going to see a radical change in most procurement teams, and it's not going to happen over a decade. It's going to happen in this first or second year of tariffs. And I think we're starting to see it. I was trying to figure out, is that why, as I look out across the procurement landscape, there is so much job displacement today. I know a lot of people who are probably in my generation, so kind of this Gen X, call it 45 to 55 years old, who have had good procurement jobs with big companies for 10, 15, 20 years, and all of a sudden they find themselves out of work. Is this the flushing that we're starting to see, where there's a belief that why do I need these older, overpriced resources that are not getting it done? I need a newer, younger generation that's less expensive, that knows how to use the new technologies and new tools, and thinks in a different way about this. I don't know if that's exactly right, but I do think the hot take itself is right, which is there's a major finger being pointed at procurement right now, saying you're not up for this challenge.
Yeah. Do you think, Alan, was it different though during COVID with folks needing to go? Because right, it was a lot of like supply stuff. Maybe
Yeah.
at that point it was like, well, we kind of just need to do whatever we could do.
Yes.
Now it's like
All
we should
hands
have
on
been
deck.
prepared.
Well, I think that was the wake-up call. That was the clarion call that people should have heeded and said, "Holy crap, I can't do things. What got me here is not going to get me there," as the famous saying goes. I got to do things differently. And you and I banged the gong on that since we started this podcast about how people need to be more strategic. They need to be more thoughtful about secondary and tertiary sources of supply. They need to be qualifying new suppliers. And I think that's what these tariffs are really uncovering, is when somebody says, hey, China has 150% tariff on it. What are you going to do about that source of supply that now is going to be completely out of reach for us to be able to buy? And there was no secondary source of supply. And you and I know those things don't happen overnight. They take months and years to develop secondary, tertiary sources of supply and qualify them in order to be able to make a switch if you need to make a switch.
Yeah. You know what's something that kind of always like, it just never sat well with me. For the longest time, I'd always heard like, I would go to different conferences and people would say, oh, you know what? Procurement just doesn't have a seat at the table. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I generally think that seats are given to folks that show they deserve it. And it's maybe a similar thing to what you're saying. And that could be for any department, right? I mean, finance might not have a seat at the table for a lot of folks if you don't have someone that's like showing the value, making sure folks understand, making things clear, showing the priority that should be placed in your area. And when a lot of execs or just leadership in general, like when they look at their teams, they're saying, all right, who's driving things for me? Right? Those are the ones that usually get to be heard. Like who's creating the value for me? Who's, in sourcing's case, like, okay, like cost reduction, but like you could be able to also speak to risk mitigation and to understand the economy and why things might matter, right? Being able to forward look and have those conversations and make your executives more intelligent in your field, in your area. That's kind of how you get real seats at the table. They're not always just assigned via an
Agreed.
EVP. It can also be via just making everyone clearer, understanding, and building up to that. So I do tend to think, from because I've worked in some different fields, that procurement does end up being led versus leading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good hot take in and of itself. I mean, it's like a little side note on my hot take that we're not up to the challenge. But it's also a good lead in to my third hot take. So number two, procurement's not up to the challenge, is kind of the tough love message. Number three is a little bit more of a hopeful sounding message. It is not too late when you find yourself, like, I love using golf as an analogy for almost all things in life. When you've just made that terrible shot into the lake and you got to take your penalty and you got to lay up and and hit another ball, this is your chance to make the next best shot. So it's not too late, is my third hot take. Procurement teams can get in and start to do what you were suggesting, Tom, which is be more strategic, earn that seat at the table. It's not too late for you to take a look at the tariffs and say, what is this going to mean for my company, and how do I reduce risk, reduce cost, increase quality, all the things that good procurement teams should have been doing since the beginning of time, but largely I think have been caught flat-footed and not done. And the reason why I say that it's not too late is because I do believe that we're going to have this tariff shake the box kind of confusion scenario, negotiation scenario going on for 12 years. I think it's going to be across all of Trump's 4 years. And then I believe, even though I certainly don't know that this is the case, I think it's greatest likelihood at this point that at least the next administration will be an administration in the mold of Trump, and probably two administrations after that. So I think that we might be in 8 or 12 years of this, the attempt by the U.S. to use its power for a bit of global economic domination, so that we can kind of rectify what's happening inside the U.S. from an economic standpoint. So it's not too late, procurement teams. If you start building now, if you plant your tree now, it'll grow into from a small tree into a big tree that's producing acorns and shade and everything that you want, and firewood and everything you want it to be doing 12 years from now.
Yeah, and the way to execute on that, Alan, I'd say, is because there's always things in flight with these tariffs, but it is understanding markets. It's understanding at least current day, being able to present out what could be the most advantageous for like support within, if you're doing manufacturing, like understanding the implications. Maybe have some version of like a model built based on your industry for where the suppliers are today, and then where you could
Yep.
focus in the future. And if something changes, this was what would happen. Like, that's the thing that people love. Like, execs love those type of things.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
everyone's a person to begin with, right? We all, and then you have folks that work at companies, and then, CEOs like yourself, Alan, that then have customers that they need to support and figure out similarly how to support as if they were a boss, right? So
Yep.
if you go to a customer, or if I go through executive leadership and show something that's like, this is how the world was yesterday, this is how it is today, and this is what could happen if scenario one, scenario two, scenario three. That's a pretty bad, like, that's a cool presentation, right? And that
Yeah,
shows
it
value, it
is.
shows thought beyond your role, and that's the type of thing that execs and folks that have companies want.
Yeah. And it's when your team starts doing really valuable work like that that you actually enjoy coming to work, right?
True.
When you're doing something that's important for the underlying health of the business and you feel like you're really contributing, that's when it really pays off. So, it's you shot out a tweet earlier this week that I know that you're working on building some AI tools yourself, and you asked the question, what's more important, kind of understanding industry trends and data, or another potential product that you're building, finding new suppliers. Which of those two things is more important, A or B? And I know one guy, a couple of people tweeted back that number 2 was more important. I said, for me, where I sit in my current role, number 1 is more important, understanding industry trends. But I do agree in this discussion, number 2 is more important, finding new suppliers. That the ability to go out and scour the world and make sure that you've got a 3 or 4 country strategy, so that when these tariffs get locked down, you don't know who's going to have the highest, who's going to have the lowest, who's going to have the best quality, who's going to have the best ability to provide sources for you, provide products for you, goods and services. I think that's going to be hugely important to most procurement teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think both are. Yeah, that's something that I'm constantly. I think it is both. When you're building out a product, sometimes what I've recognized, Alan, is like you just got to focus on something. So I've kind of like split up something I was working before and took the most interesting pieces. And we'll see what works. But yeah, supplierhire.com. It's free, Alan, to plug myself. But
awesome.
But yeah, I think that there's just understanding the trends and being able to speak to those. And I mean, you figure a lot of this is becoming easier. You have knowledge at your fingertips way more than you did even with Google. Google, you had to scroll, you had to spend hours doing stuff. Now you can just get the feedback quick.
Summarize.
It's 95%, 99% correct at this point. You can ask for sources. These things are very valuable in our roles.
Yep, that's right. So those are my hot takes on what might be coming through through the tariffs, the early days of the tariffs that we've experienced in the last 3, 4, 5 months. Did you have something? I think you had something on the AI front that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, it was just kind of similar to that broad brush of if it's going into your contracts and pulling out contract language. It was just one of the, I don't know if this is darker side or not. I think folks will originally view this as a little darker side, but where these internal ChatGPT products are going, they're getting connected to everything within an organization. So connect to your contracts, connect to your Slack or Teams, connect to your email, sort of across the whole gamut of what you're working on, SharePoints, things of that nature. And what I saw a demo this week. I don't think it's a demo. I think it's live, but I saw it demoed where one of these, you can kind of give you a summary of what you did last week. But I'd envision this, Alan, as this is going to end up being, you talk about like to be managed by AI. I think this is where it's going to end up going, where your manager or even your call it CEO could say like, what did Tom, what did Alan do this week? And then they'll be able to see based upon what it has access to, what you worked on, right? Goes into Google Sheets, sees you wrote up an email about it, and be able to give summaries across the board for things that are happening. And this is things that some companies already do today, right? If you're in like the financial area, you have a lot of access to things. You can see how much people are logged on, but I think it'll become the next level of this is what was actually worked on here, as opposed to me or someone sending me a summary of what they did. We'll just have it based upon what you accessed.
Yeah, I like that. And actually, the reason why I like it, I agree with you. It can sound a little dark. It can sound a bit like Big Brother, but I think of it a bit differently. I think of it as almost a tool that I can use to measure myself. How am I doing in my job? You know, I read a lot of productivity blogs, productivity hacks, and subscribe to them.
Is that the first thing it'll say, really, Alan? Like, quit blogging on a Substack.
That's right. Quit doing that podcast with Tom.
Yeah, exactly.
But one of the things that I often read is, okay, keep a very accurate calendar for a few weeks and then look back across the calendar and figure out where you're spending your time. What is consuming most of your time? And then make sure that stacks up against your priorities that you outlined at the beginning of the year. Well, that's a hard thing to do, especially with my calendar, with a variety of things I do. And I'm not very good at keeping an accurate calendar of all the things I do. But maybe, again, back to this notion of AI will be directionally correct, but it's an arm's length away. It's an arm's length look at my calendar so that when it tells me, yeah, you're spending 27.5% of your time talking to clients. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, maybe you want to up that to 40 if you can, right?
Well, exactly right. It'll make it easier for me to measure myself. Yes, AI will make it easier for my boss to measure me, or a manager to measure his or her team. But I think more importantly, I kind of want to know what my personal best is. I want to have an accurate set of analytics that can tell me how am I doing. So, it's this notion of what Jordan Peterson talks about. Don't compare yourself to other people. Compare yourself to yourself yesterday. And are you better today than you were yesterday? That's what you should be aiming for.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's a lot of value in it. When I first saw it demoed, I was like, but then you kind of like take a step back, and everyone in sales is measured that way and has been probably for like 10 and a version of it for 50 years, right? A simpler version of like, how much are you delivering? And every month,
Always
every quarter, you're going to be evaluated. Always be closing. Yeah. ABC, always be closing. So I mean, it's nothing new. It's just applied elsewhere. And I agree. I mean, I also similarly take a lot of notes and always try to improve myself. I think it's probably a net benefit. And in all honesty, you should be doing a lot of stuff for a company that's paying you, right? So, or a client that's paying you. You shouldn't be worried about what they see. If you're doing a good job, you should be super comfortable with that.
Right on. Well, that's a good place for us to wrap this week. On behalf of your humble hosts here at Rebuild Procurement Podcast, we are Thomas Finn, the guy who puts the fin in finance, and your OG in procurement, Alan Veek, hoping you will make this a powerful and productive week in procurement. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.